Well, recently I finished listening through both of Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park novels on Audible. So I really want to make a retrospective both on the novel series, the two books, and the five films of the movie series. And I'm going to throw in some more stuff here or there. For guys in their 20s, I would think that these movies are going to be a large piece of their hearts, and it's going to be universal that they've seen it at least once, if not multiple times. Dinosaurs are something that really catches the eye of a lot of kids. I think a lot of us go through this phase of wanting to be a paleontologist when you grow up. Kind of funny because I went through that phase when I liked dinosaurs, and now it's kind of, I'm kind of maybe too old to go and re-educate myself, but the ecology of different periods is probably way more interesting than dinosaurs, and how something like the physical geography of Pangea affected the ecology of life in the Permian period. Seems more interesting than dinosaurs a little bit, but this is kind of off topic. One of my first memories actually was going to see Jurassic Park: The Lost World in the movie theater. And that was a really big deal for me when I was a little kid, seeing that movie and getting all the little toys. I had the van from the movie, and I repeated the part where it gets knocked off the cliff over my stairs when I was a little kid, hundreds and hundreds, thousands of times. And the plastic middle like ripped off because I did it so many times. So let's just start with the first movie because everybody's seen it. Obviously, in terms of filmmaking and in terms of what everybody's going to think, this is the best film in the series for what the average person's going to think. At the time when it came out, this was the highest grossing film in history, or at least until it was beaten by Titanic 4 years later. Kind of sad there. Titanic is not the best movie, but we'll go on. So many ripoffs and other movies with dinosaurs came out because of the massive popularity of this. So if you're a kid in the 90s, dinosaurs were everywhere because of how popular this movie was. I remember, I don't even know if they have it, but they had dinosaur chicken nuggets even before this. But they had the dinosaur, juice. What are those things like? Like those fruit little pieces of the fruit gummies. They had dinosaurs of that. And there was the Flintstones live action movie. There was the Prehistoria movie. Land Before Time was actually made before the Jurassic Park, but after they made Jurassic Park, then they made a billion Land Before Time direct-to-video sequels. And then there was the Dinosaurs TV series. There's so many to name that came out after that. If you think, if you think about it, this movie is really etched into the American consciousness in the same way that a movie like the first three Star Wars movie or Raiders of the Lost Ark or Back to the Future are. Everybody knows this film inside and out. So I really don't think that there's any merit in me talking about this to a great detail. Of course, there's all kinds of weird continuity errors and bizarre stuff. Like how can the T-Rex just magically appear, walk over the top, and then the car gets knocked off and you look back down and it's this giant cliff. So apparently it's like hovering above and it walks out, like hovering above and it takes out the fence. To be fair, that doesn't detract when you're watching it. It's just kind of a funny thing that you realize in retrospective. And something that's in this film that's not in the sequels, they attempt it sometimes, is this sense of wonder you get towards these creatures. And this is very Spielbergian sense of whimsy and wonder, They get off the helicopter and they look up and it's the Brachiosaurus and they're in awe of its magnitude and size. And that really isn't in the novel either. Because Crichton's novel, the original 1990 Jurassic Park novel, is a horror novel. Crichton, of course, does his trademark focus on tech, but the novel, if you read through it, there's so much focus on how people are being killed by the carnivorous dinosaurs. And the book begins with, little girls being attacked by the Compsognathus and, a worker on the park being ripped apart by a raptor. And that's the first 50 pages. The first 50 pages are dinosaurs and young adults, teenagers, being attacked and killed by dinosaurs. And how these dinosaurs are starting to spread on the mainland. And the way that he describes the kills are very graphic, gory, and lengthy. It's very 1980s, or at least pre-collapse of the Soviet Union, when the culture changed, the heavy metal and horror declined. It's very 80s horror novel. If you're a horror fan and you've seen the movie, I would really, really suggest for you actually to go out and get the book. Because if you're a horror fan, you'll really like the book. So I was talking about how the first 50 or so pages are dedicated to all these dinosaur attacks that are starting to occur on the mainland. So this is a lot different from the book, because the dinosaurs don't really, or a lot different from the movie, because the dinosaurs don't get onto the mainland really in the movies until the 5th movie or whatever. But at the very beginning of the first book, they're on the mainland. And what becomes the movie, the animals killing people on land, the animals killing people on land is the framing of dice, because investors are, they're doing an emergency tour to calm investors after the dinosaurs got off the mainland. And the plot of the book is much more complex than the plot of the film, and generally follow the same outline, and the movie's just a very simplified version. Something that's really interesting in the movie that you start to notice if you read the book, or vice versa, is that there's only the 4 people that are watching, plus the 2 kids, plus Hammond, plus the park ranger guy. They're the only people on the island. But in the book, there's the hotel maids and cooks and everything, and multiple people that also work at the park. So just kind of a lot different. The movie's really simplified, and it makes a lot more sense that way. In the novel, the park collapses gradually over time, and most of the action in the book is the park managers attempting to put the park back together after the power initially went out. They actually put the power back on, and then computer errors caused it to go out again, and then the whole thing collapses. And a lot of characters, for example, are drastically changed. Donald Gennaro, who is the lawyer and investor in the park. In the film, he's this cowardly lawyer who abandoned his children and gets eaten by the T-Rex, right? In the novel, there's 2 characters, Ed Regis and Donald Gennaro. And Ed Regis and Donald Gennaro are combined. And Donald Gennaro actually is pretty heroic. He's okay, that's the guy's name, Robert Muldoon. He's Robert Muldoon's sidekick throughout the whole entire book. Grant hates him for no apparent reason. It's just, I don't like that part of Grant's character. Grant, by the way, is less heroic. He doesn't even try to save the kids while the T-Rex attacks. That's completely added in the book. He tries to run away, and he gets knocked out by the T-Rex's foot in the book. And then afterwards, after all, he eats Regis and stuff, they escape out. The T-Rex eats Regis. They escape out with Grant. Tim and Lex's characters, for example, they're flipped. So Lex is much younger in the book, and Tim is her age. Like, Tim is probably late middle school, early high school age, and then Lex is 7, 8. And Tim is very into computers, very into dinosaurs, very erudite. Crichton always exaggerates how intelligent kids are going to be in both of these books, and you'll see that later with this Archie character in the second book. But when we go back to Hammond is 180 degrees different in the book. In the movie, he's very, very charming, and he's good-natured, but he's misguided. In the book, he's really this money-grubbing old man who's bitter and privileged by his wealth. He shows no regard for the safety of his park and its employees, and people are constantly telling him this isn't safe, this is going to collapse, and he's like, fuck it, money's money. And he doesn't even like his grandchildren. They're just there to coax the investors into having a warmer heart, not shutting down the book. And Dr. Well, I think I named him Doctor Who. Doctor Wu. Dr. Wu here. The Chinese American scientists in the movies, it's become more a bigger character in Jurassic World and Jurassic World 2. He is a very heroic character in the first book, and he's one of the main characters in the first book, and he directly tries to prevent what's going on. He directly confronts Hammond for about like 10 pages and debates him about the safety of the park. And he's like, we need to make these dinosaurs slower and safer. And he's like, I want real dinosaurs. And who's like, that's bullshit. These ain't real. And then they change it so he evolves into a villain in the movies. Because the movie is a simplified version of the book, there are a lot of scenes in the book which didn't get transformed in the first movie, but they make their way into the film sequels. So the little girl getting attacked by the Compsognathus on the beach, that's one of the first scenes in the book, and that's the opening of the second movie. In the movie, somewhat nonsensically, Alan Grant and the children, Tim and Lex, just walk across the park, basically. In the novel, they have to go down a river, and they're chased by a T-Rex the whole way. And them being chased down, rafting by the T-Rex kind of gets absorbed into Jurassic Park 3. And the pterodactyl scene in Jurassic Park 3 and the Spinosaurus looking for them in the river, that's inspired by all the river rafting scenes in the first movie, or in the first novel. It didn't make their way into the movie. And there's a part where they get chased by the Tyrannosaurus into a cave, and this is repeated in the second movie. Something that really bothered me in the movie was they just shut down the park because of sabotage. It's not really a consequence of the park. It's a consequence, maybe they didn't have enough people, but it's a consequence of sabotage completely in the movie. But in the novel, there's numerous reasons why it failed. And Hammond actually spares a lot of expenses. He fucking is cheap as shit and doesn't have safety protocols. He just has everything automated. And the computers break down, and they only have a limited amount of people that knows how to work the computers. And when these people die, then the park is completely irrecoverable. Because really, I always thought if they just had herbivorous dinosaurs, why wouldn't they just get rid of the Velociraptors and T-Rex and then just restart the park with plant-eating dinosaurs? They didn't seem to be a problem at all in the first movie. But when you go back to the book, the Compsognathus are actually ecologically completely necessary, and they're the ones that are escaping. Ecologically speaking, on the park, they function as dung beetles for the Apatosaurus and the Triceratops and the Stegosaurus. They're these dung beetles that eat the shit of the other dinosaurs and clean up the park and make it more cleanly, hygienic, easier to look at, and easier to smell. So if you took the Compsognathus out of the picture, the entire ecology of the park would collapse, and they're the most dangerous animals because they're the ones that are easily escaping the park, getting onto the mainland, and killing children at the beginning of the book. The ending of the novel actually is really contrived. It's nowhere near as good as the ending of the film. Grant poisons the velociraptors by directly feeding them eggs. He's like rolling down these eggs that he put syringes full of poison into, and it's just really fucking stupid. And then later after, there's a second climax, which is really boring, where he forces Gennaro out of character at gunpoint to explore a raptor nest with him. And I hated this scene. It's just stupid. Gennaro and Grant are both out of their character. Grant all of a sudden hates Gennaro. It's just said in one sentence, 200 or 300 pages. He just naturally hates Gennaro. And Gennaro is being forced, after being very heroic the last 200 or so pages, into being a complete coward out of nowhere. It's just very forced, this ending, just so Grant can observe the dinosaurs in their nest, which, of course, they transplant that into the third movie as well. The film's Deus Ex Machina, with the T-Rex saving them at the end, is just very emotionally stimulating, and it makes you feel good. It's just a much better ending. So, overall, the movie and the book are both really good. If you like horror stuff, the book's probably for you. if you like the adventure and you like something that's more coherent and doesn't have is because the book is more of a mixed bag. Parts of it are really good and parts of it are just like a letdown. So the movie's definitely more balanced and it's easily digestible. But if you want that horror and you want better science fiction explanations, go for the book. But you'll really enjoy both of them if you go to them. Both of these are great. Now let's talk about the sequel, Jurassic Park: The Lost World. This is my favorite movie in the franchise. It is the first movie I remember watching in the movie theater. But let me say something first off. This movie is much worse than the first one. It has a lot of flaws. The movie is very awkward and infuriating. Its theme of environmentalism and animal rights is just stupid. They ruin it. And now let me get this straight. I like animals and I do really like the environment. In this channel and in my writings, I am very critical of industrial civilization and its consequences for ecology. But the so-called heroes in this movie, and Vince Vaughn's character especially, are not very heroic. And if you take them outside the framing of this film, they're downright evil. The so-called villains of this movie work for the company which created the dinosaurs and are capturing to put them in a zoo in San Diego. And they are framed as being abusive towards the animals by putting them in cages. Most people aren't opposed to zoos in real life. I know that like they're being more cruel and they're putting the dinosaurs in the small things, but let's look at this outside. So most people they don't hate zoos in real life, even if you do oppose them for their supposed cruelty or their historical cruelty of taming animals and putting them in tight enclosures. They're a necessary evil at the most because they're extremely important for conservation efforts. And they spread public awareness that has greatly increased the public's interest in biology and ecology. And the thing is if you look at it, zoos are actually extremely popular attractions worldwide. But even granted that, the heroes in this movie are intentionally sabotaging the villains' camp and directly resulting in the deaths of dozens of people. So they're killing these people for forcing these animals into zoos, which they're given the legal right to by the government because they own these animals. So you're creating a situation where the heroes are intentionally killing people for somewhat minor and arguable wrongs. They're terrorists. Like Vince Vaughn is a terrorist. Vince Vaughn goes so far as to disarm the hunter in the movie. And he opens up his elephant gun, and there's no bullets. There's no shells. There you go. There's no shells because he took out the ammo from the elephant gun and stole all the ammo. And that in the movie itself, that directly results the deaths of dozens of people on screen. And Vince Vaughn is supposed to be heroic in the movie. It's just a massive flaw. I've watched the movie so many times. And I can laugh it off, but it is really infuriating if you stop and think about it. Vince Vaughn is a terrorist who kills dozens of people, and he's depicted heroically, and nothing ever bad happens to him. This movie definitely is darker and has more horror than any of the other movies in the series. Maybe Fallen Kingdom is a little bit more, but we'll get to that. And this movie definitely is a lot less family friendly. It's self-aware and even has a very black comedic joke. And in retrospective, I was really surprised this joke got put into the PG-13 movie. So at the beginning, there's a kid that's screaming, or the mother's screaming at a kid being attacked by dinosaurs on a beach scene, and then it reverse shots into Jeff Goldblum just standing there. So she's apparently screaming at Jeff Goldblum instead of her child getting eaten by dinosaurs. Now, that's a great film scene, but putting that in a movie geared towards a family audience is kind of edgy. And it's very funny, but it's very edgy because the first movie definitely was for a family audience, and this movie is a lot less so. And I think a lot of people, when they went to this movie, They're disappointed that Sam Neill's Alan Grant was not the main character of the film, and Jeff Goldblum's Ian Malcolm is made the main character. Now, personally, I think this is Jeff Goldblum's best movie, at least as an actor, and this is coming from a huge fan of the David Cronenberg remake of The Fly. I just always loved him in this movie. His sarcasm is deadpan. His sarcasm and deadpan is S tier. It really adds to the black comedy of this film and makes it so much more rewatchable. I think that the creature effects this is the best creature effects in the entire series. The animatronics are just awesome. The T-Rex has more on-screen time than all the other dinosaurs combined in the previous movie. The action scenes are just wonderful, especially where the trailer gets knocked off the cliff. That trailer getting knocked off the cliff is probably Steven Spielberg's, in terms of technicals, best action scene ever. And the scene where Eddie Carr dies is my favorite scene in the entire series by a mile. The brutality and the sense of helplessness as he's ripped apart by two T-Rexes at the same time is incredible. Again, going back, this movie's way more of a horror film. Just the helplessness of him getting picked up, dwarfed by these two T-Rexes and ripped apart. It's just amazing to me. This movie's just so rewatchable. I watched it so many times when I was a little kid. Way more times than I watched the first movie. And I broke the VHS tape. And I remember when I was a kid, it had that hollow foil at the front of with the T-Rex roaring, and you take it at an angle. It's just a jungle, and then the T-Rex roars, and I fucking ruined that because I watched the movie so many times. I wonder if the darker tone of this movie and the increased violence influenced my interest in the horror genre across film and literature. With the first film and book, you can argue which one was better. But here the answer is very obvious. The movie is far superior to the book. The book's plot actually is way simpler than the movie. With one exception, the combination of the two characters of Arby, who's this black nerdy kid who was far more intelligent than his age, and Kelly, which is a girl. So basically what they do, and this is so nonsensical, I guess maybe she's adopted or something, but that was before that culturally happened in the United States, so I always assumed Malcolm just liked black chicks. Because Malcolm's white, right? And the daughter's black because they made her black because they combined her and Arby together. Because Kelly's white, and they're two kids that are friends, and they get on to it, and Kelly's in the movie is made black, but then he's made to be Malcolm's daughter. It's just fucking funny. Neither in the novel, neither of them are his children, because he doesn't have kids in the novel. Because in the novel, here's the other thing, is like Dr. Malcolm, even though he's supposed to be the voice piece of Cronenberg, he's not a very interesting character. He's okay in the first movie. In the second movie, he's just shit. And all the characters, I don't like them. And the villainous team in the novel, because there's two teams in the novel, and Dodgen, the guy who pays off Dennis Nedry in the book, in the film, in the first movie, he's actually, to steal the embryos. He's actually the villain of the second book, and he's going to steal eggs of dinosaurs. Except for he has one little problem with his plan. He goes to the goddamn park without a fucking gun. I mean, he has a really good weapon to, like, stun the dinosaurs. He has this radio that emits a high-pitched sound, which is, I don't know how he would know it. How would he know that the dinosaurs would all have the same frequency of hearing that it would hurt them? But it's just stupid. But he has a radio, and it's emitting this high-pitched sound, which hurts the dinosaurs' ears and puts them in severe pain and nausea, probably. But the battery falls out, and they're completely helpless, and they're attacked by the T-Rex immediately. Like, the second nest he attacks. It's so much lamer, because it's three guys. It's so much lamer than dozens of hunters who are all armed. And I know that the ending, like the second climax of the movie where the T-Rex escapes in the San Diego, is a little rushed, but it's a really good conclusion. It perfectly illustrates the danger of those creatures posing to the civilization. There is no climax to the book, though. They just kind of get off the island and that's it. The book is paced in a very lopsided way, definitely compared to the first book. It takes about halfway or even 60% about the way from them to get onto the island. Almost all the action in the book only takes place in that last third. The action there is pretty good, but it definitely takes a while, and if you're not, actively working or something while listening to an audiobook, it'd be hard to get through this thing. That being said, the characters in the novel, I said that before, and I'm going to say it again. I was just tripping over my words or my script. They're way less likable, and their versions in the movie are way more likable. I don't like Sarah Harding at all in the book. The kids, they're really boring, and Levine, who you're supposed to dislike, sucks. And Malcolm, I already talked about this, but Malcolm is supposed to be Crichton, a stand-in for Crichton, but he's just not he's humorless compared to his portrayal by Goldblum. This I do kind of appreciate from the craft of being an author, is that Crichton parodied his own book by retconning Malcolm's death. He retcons the T-Rex vision problems, and most predominantly, he re-crippled Malcolm, when he goes into the trailer, he gets crippled again, and when he's drug-addled, because when he gets drug-addled in the first book, he becomes, philosophical, and then he just parodies this in the second book. He becomes humorous and nonsensical, and something which in the first book wasn't always the most engaging was Malcolm's quasi-philosophical commentary, and I know it's Crichton, what Crichton wants to say, but in this book, it's an endless commentary, both of quasi-philosophical and quasi-scientific, which interrupts the flow of the story, and it's 10 times more of it in this one than in the first one. And I wasn't even a fan of it in the first book. And in general, it's a readable book, but it's got its good parts, but the Spielberg adaptation is just 180 degrees better. Okay, guys, let's move on to Jurassic Park III. And I was a little kid when this came out. I remember being really excited for this movie when I was a child and liking it when it came out. And it's a fun movie. It has its flaws, the biggest of which is the elephant in the room, the Spinosaurus. And it was all over in the marketing of the film. And the problem is everybody likes the T-Rex better. And it kills the T-Rex at the very beginning of the film, completely ahistorically, and doesn't make any sense because the T-Rex would crush it because its jaws are far more muscular. But whatever. And I think most people just prefer the T-Rex. Everybody's opinion is just going to be the Spinosaurus isn't as cool as the T-Rex. And I personally like the Spinosaurus, and I think it's really cool. And I like it in the movie. I really, really love the animatronic effects of it. They're outstanding in this movie, but the T-Rex is still cooler. Another complaint with the film is that it negates Alan Grant's character development. Now, I don't think people complain that much about it, but because I've seen these movies so many times, I've really noticed that. It kind of edges me on if I watch it in a marathon. In the beginning of the movie, he doesn't like kids and isn't open to having them. And in the first movie, right, so his character development in the first movie, he doesn't want to have kids. Sattler is his girlfriend. They're not girlfriend and boyfriend in the book, right? But in the movie, they're pretty explicitly made into that role. And Sattler wants to have kids, and he doesn't. But then he takes Lex and Tim. Because here's the thing, Spielberg, and this is to him doing a better job, especially in the second movie, and improves of the first book, is that he adds a lot of character development. And Crichton, he's not like Lovecraft or something where character development doesn't matter to him, but character development definitely comes secondary to the science and to the horror action scenes and stuff. But the character development of Grant in the book is he goes through the park with these kids, and then he likes kids, and you can see that they're holding each other at the end of the movie. They're looking across actually at the plane. The kids are resting and sleeping on his arms, and they're smiling because now they're going to get married and have kids. Well, the movie negated it, reset his character, so he goes with a kid through the park again, and then grows to like the kid. And, Sattler goes off and has a husband and a kid, but they're still friends. It's awkward because they're like, I guess like they would still be like, they would still, that happens in real life because they're in the same field. It's not as awkward as that kind of thing is in stuff where somebody doesn't share the same field or doesn't work together. But again, this movie is a lot simpler too, and that's kind of a problem. It's not a problem with enjoyment, but it kind of led to this point because it's just this really simple rescue story. It led to this point where what do you do next? You could just go down and become like generic, redo this thing and have a rescue story. Like the second movie, just repeat the second movie where they go to this island with this dinosaurs on it. And that would work for a video game plot or something, but it doesn't really work for a movie plot. The story became stagnant because this story was so simple of just doing this simple rescue plot. And ultimately, that's what I think that led to the hiatus of 14 years between these movies. There just wasn't anything else to do character-wise. And a lot of these are the dinosaurs getting onto the mainland, and of course, once you get to that point, you kind of get problems because I think they kind of run into budget problems with what they're wanting to do if they get the dinosaurs on the mainland. But we'll see with the sixth film. And another problem is the movie has a lot of forced humor. There's editing which breaks the tension, for example, in the climax scene with the Spinosaurus and Barney the dinosaur being intercut. Some people have suggested that was forced by the studio so that the movie would be more palatable by children, and if you watch it, that makes a lot of sense. Generally, the humor in the first two films, and especially the second one, was pretty good. But up to this point, this definitely is the worst movie in the franchise. But it's by no means whatsoever a bad movie. The animatronic and the puppet effects are just awe-inspiring, just wonderful. And this is 2001. This is right before they're abolished, essentially. I know a little bit they're trending in because the fifth movie in this series, the fourth one basically had all completely wall-to-wall CGI. But with, the best part of Star Wars 9, I don't know, what is it, The Revenge of the Jedi? I don't fucking know. Rise of Skywalker, it actually has a lot of good puppet effects. These puppets are slowly creeping back into movies and replacing CGI because it's becoming really apparent the CGI is being so overused, and there's something going on to where the CGI in the fifth movie example, and we're getting ahead of ourselves, actually looks worse than the CGI in the first movie. Now let's go back to this. The characters in the movie are bland, but they're not really awful and hateable. I think that in the fourth movie they're much blander. Overall, it's a short movie. It's like 120 minutes, which is pretty easy to watch. And you can just, if you're going through a lazy day and you're watching a bunch of movies, or you're watching these movies in a marathon, it's an easy watch. It's like 120 minutes. It's got a lot of action. It's definitely fun to watch with your friends. And at this point, after this, there's this 14-year hiatus between the films. And I began to grow older, and I became, I saw, these handful of horror movies that I'd rent from the video store as a little kid, or my parents would show me. I actually saw, like, The Thing and Aliens when I was in third grade. I guess that maybe my dad wasn't supposed to do that. So I was becoming a way bigger fan of horror movies as I got older. And I saw this direct-to-video movie called Raptor. And I watched, in backwards order, actually, just renting them, because that's how I'd rent stuff, just out of control, all over the place. And I was a kid, I had no, sense of quality, so I'd rent, all these, sci-fi original movies and record them on VHS tapes. And then I watched, like Friday the 13th or something out of order, or, Pumpkinhead, or just weird stuff completely out of order. I'd rent, The Monster Squad 100 billion times and watch that over and over again. That's the way kids are. So anyway, I watched the Carnosaur movies in reverse order. Yeah, we're talking about Carnosaur now. The Carnosaur movies are the mockbusters of the Jurassic Park franchise. And the first one is a horror movie, if you like horror movies at least. Probably not for normies. It's a pretty good movie, in my opinion. It's definitely developed a cult following. And if you want a full-on horror alternative to Jurassic Park, try out these series, at least the first one. It really delivers the gore and the cheese. The second one has some pretty good gore too. The makeup effects were done by a late John Carl. I'm gonna say his name wrong. Buchler. He was a regular director and effects artist to a lot of Emperor Pictures movies. Emperor Pictures was it was the bigger budget version of Full Moon from the 80s. So he directed and created the effects for the first Troll movie, the prequel to one of the greatest movies of all time, Troll 2. As well as the most famous movie, obviously, he ever made is Friday the 13th, Part 7. You know, the one of Jason versus Carrie, basically. The special effects in this movie got rushed a little bit so it could come out before Jurassic Park, obviously. They're not as good as Stan Winston's. Here's the problem with talking about that, though, is because the special effects in this movie, I don't like the way that they're meant to be. Is that they're meant to be less animal-like and more monster-like, if that makes sense. And everything in this, there's no CGI in this, so when he has the T-Rex, every shot of the T-Rex is a real robot, which is pretty cool. They really, sorry to say they aren't as good as Stan Winston's, but is a pretty big Full Moon, and he did stuff from Full Moon too, an Emperor Pictures fan. Showing off my horror fan fucking nerd card right now. His effects have always had a charm for me. And, you know, this movie's got a dinosaur eating a guy's dick while he's peeing. What could be better than that? So, anyway, let's go back. And in the first movie, there's this female scientist who's actually played by Laura Dern's mom, which is really fucking funny. Laura Dern is the person that plays Sattler. The female scientist who creates this virus which infects chickens and girls and forces them to give birth to dinosaur eggs. So these dinosaurs will explode, or chickens will explode and explode, and there'll be dinosaur eggs left after all the gore. And then women's will give birth to them, and their hips and legs will shatter and break out comedically, and they'll give birth to a dinosaur egg. These dinosaurs apparently experience biogenesis and rapidly grow to adult size in a matter of hours. At least the Velociraptor ones do. And she wants to cause the extinction of the human race, which includes herself because she gets infected and dies of it in the movie. So she succumbs to the virus. And she's going to replace the human race with dinosaurs. And the main character, he's not a scientist. He's just a security guard who has a romance for a hippie chick. As somebody who writes and somebody who's not the richest person in real life, I prefer, and this is something that kind of is a problem with Hollywood movies, I prefer to follow more working class or blue collar people. It's a lot more relatable to me and more entertaining characters. When you go into Jurassic Park 5 and you're just in these mansions and all these rich people and every character's rich in all these movies, it's kind of like, I know this is so odd topic, it's kind of a breath of fresh air to have a character who's just a security guard. So anyway, he becomes a hero and he chases down and he finds, because apparently she made an antidote for the Doomsday virus, and he finds the antidote, saves his girlfriend, and he's fleeing from the lab. He flees from the lab, and he fights the T-Rex with a bobcat. Now that's fucking awesome, to be honest. He fights a T-Rex with a bobcat for the climax. And then he saves his girlfriend from the antidote. And guess what? The movie has an anti-climax. An anti-Deus Ex Machina. So he's saved the day. The army breaks in. Hazmat suits, flamethrowers, fucking massacres, kills everyone, prevents the virus from spreading. It saves the world through killing everyone that could have been infected with it. Because it's set in the middle of nowhere in Montana or something, right? Or in I think it's in the Southwest. So it's set in a desert in the middle of nowhere, like Tremors or something, right? And it's set in this desert in the middle of nowhere in the American West, and so the virus can't spread anywhere, so the army just kills everyone in the entire town. This is fucking great. Well, the movie's plot is just batshit insane. But it's a cheap gore fest. It's a cheap gore fest that's made the cash in into the Jurassic Park franchise. And as you guys notice, as Argent described me one time pretty infamously, I'm a weird dude, so I love it. The irony is that the novel that this movie is based on, really in name only, by Harry Adam Knight, in its own right is a pretty big cult book. It's out of print. It's like $100 right now. But it actually came out before Jurassic Park, and people claim, because I haven't been able to read them back to back, that Crichton ripped off the novel. So it's this very like ironic thing. So Crichton rips off the novel, then Crichton's movie gets made into, or a book gets made into a movie, and then they make a movie of the novel that Crichton ripped off, and that rips off Crichton's movie. Pretty ironic. Hopefully it's going to re-enter print again because of, what is the book called? Paperbacks from Hell, which is re-energized cult paperback novels from the 80s and 70s in that genre. That writer, Harry Adam Knight, is becoming a pretty big cult figure again. They're reprinting his books. It's in copyright hell, I think. But hopefully they'll be able to print a new edition of it soon. And the movie was followed by 2 to 4 sequels. You want to consider Raptor and the Eden Project or whatever as sequels. But Raptor is just like merely editing of the first 3 movies into its own movie with additional like actors, and they're all like fucking porn actors or something. Just shit. And then Eden Project came later, and I think it has the actor who's Candyman in it. I'm not kidding. And it's like, it just uses recut footage from the first Carnosaur. Because it was made by Pratchett as well, or Bratchett. I think it was the last movie he made before he died. He's probably just wanted to make a movie again. So the second one is basically a shot-for-shot remake of Aliens. And it has some good gore. But the creature effects are cheaper, and then the third one, they're cheap. And then Raptor and Eden Project are just, stock footage. Completely, all of them are really inferior. So now let's get to Jurassic World, 14 years later from Jurassic Park III. And it's my least favorite movie in the franchise. Now, I don't hate it. I feel guilty about this because this movie has become so popular now. And maybe it's because I saw it on a first date with an ex-girlfriend. And maybe I'm some cynical, 26-year-old boomer or something. And even though I frequently like new movies too, there's just this dislike I have in my personal opinion. And I mean, I don't really like Chris Pratt. I don't. And I just don't. Like, I don't hate him. I don't love him. He's just kind of average to me. I don't really like him. He doesn't pull me in. I never watched Parks and Rec. He's okay in Guardians of the Galaxy. But in general, I just find him meh. I don't like Claire either. And the kids are just fucking really annoying. Much worse than Eric in the third movie. Tim and Lex, worse than Kelly in the other movies. Definitely worse than the little girl in 5. Just don't like them. Hate the kids, really, to be honest. And the effects in this movie are just awful. They're just really cheap, balloony dinosaurs. There's no animatronics, no puppets. It's all CGI. It's much worse than the first movie. And the animals, the creatures are really balloony. Like that Liopliocene, Charlie. That thing is bigger than Godzilla. It's not represented whatsoever, the real animal. I know I'm so nerdy when I say this. But I when I complain about CGI, I really feel like a 30-year-old boomer when I say this. But stop motion really is better than CGI the vast majority of time. In retrospective of seeing hundreds of movies, I really have come to think stop motion is superior. I understand that people work really hard on CGI, but in general, I think it's inferior. The lighting in CGI always looks really bad. The animals or creatures or whatever are always balloony looking. The physics are garbage. And the actors are, they're acting against their imagination, where you have these very surreal, weird acting. Because when you get to a movie like what is it, like Sky Captain, the World Tomorrow, and the whole, or like Summit, like Attack of the Clones. You could tell this in certain scenes. They're just like up against the green screen and they're just doing, I don't know what to do. It's just they're acting against nothing. It's just not my favorite. And as a horror fan, special effects are a major draw to any film, and CGI is just way less interesting, especially compared to animatronics and puppets. Animatronics and puppets are the gold standard. Those are what's really good in movies. And I'm not trying to be a hipster. I legitimately feel that CGI is just inferior. This is a feeling that I've had since I was a child and has continued my whole life and become stronger and stronger. And I said this before, the scale of the creatures in this movie, they balloon up and down in size. It's just, they transform, they look different in every scene. It just feels like a really, I mean, CGI is animation. It's just a really bad cartoon. Furthermore, like, I think this movie's stupid. The whole Raptor betrayal thing and the weaponized raptors are fucking retarded. The idea that the dinosaurs are impervious to the military was an incomplete discontinuity with the books and the movies that came before it. The so-called, military that doesn't exist in Costa Rica comes in and kills all the animals in the first book. And in the second movie, the Tyrannosaurus gets defeated by tranquilizers twice. Right? The military can easily rescue the characters from Site B, and none of the military gets killed in the third movie. It just goes against continuity that the Velociraptors are some invincible thing against, like, they're supposed to be Navy SEALs. It's just fucking stupid. Now, I don't even hate this movie. I think it's okay. Like, it's just okay. Like, I mean, I'm complaining against it too much. I like the Ego Rex or Ignominious Rex. It's actually kind of cool, but the movie's nothing special. It just feels like this prepackaged movie that's meant to be generic, that's not supposed to be hated or loved by anyone. Anyone can see it. It's just a product. I feel the same way about all the Marvel movies and anything that J.J. Abrams ever touched. They are products which resemble movies that people are familiar with, and that there's no personality to them, and there's no charm. They're just, like eating at Burger King. They're not even like eating at McDonald's. They are fast food. They have that standard of quality, and they have no charm and no taste to them. That's my opinion of this movie. That's my opinion of all the Marvel movies. That's my opinion of everything J.J. Abrams ever touched. Now, that being said, I actually really I saw Jurassic World and Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom recently. Jurassic Fallen Kingdom is 10 times better than Jurassic World. Fallen Kingdom might be better than Jurassic Park III, to be honest. It's not great, but it has a lot more non-CGI. It has a lot more practical effects, if you want to call it. I don't like calling it that. I like just naming what things are. Stop motion, suits, puppets, animatronics. I just like naming it. I don't like all CGI versus practical. But off topic. But keep in mind, I saw this twice. I saw Jurassic World 3 times. So maybe I'll see it like 5 times and this movie will totally suck again. Also for me, this movie has a lot more horror. And this opening of this movie, where the guy gets killed by the T-Rex and the Liopleurodons, that's fucking great. That scene's awesome. And there's, the still, maybe not as bad, the exaggerated sense of invincibility with the dinosaurs. Maybe it's not as bad in this. I guess it's not as bad because they tranquilize all the dinosaurs on the island, so kind of improved. The idea of human cloning in the movie is cool. It's definitely a good way to put the franchise, expand the problems with fucking around with genes, but it's really underdeveloped. Hopefully they'll develop it more in the 6th movie. I like the villains in this movie a lot more than Jurassic World. In fact, I like the whole family thing way more than I like Claire and fucking whatever the fuck his name is. I'll just call him by the actor's name if I can even remember it. Chris Pratt. I really fucking way better than the whole family drama in this movie. Way better than Chris Pratt and Claire. Way more interesting. I mean, it could be I'm just a horror fan and it's kind of gothic. It's grim. a father killing a dad or grandfather or whatever. It's just and spoiler, excuse me, spoiler. Um, Cloning your own daughter because she died tragically when she was young. Pretty abusive, obviously. Human cloning's not a good thing. Pretty dark, but she exists now, so she's pretty interesting, pretty good. Kind of getting off topic. I I I don't like how in the other movie they made the dinosaur into the Dominus Rex. I like the design and everything, but it's just too smart. There's no human villains in it really, and that's kind of a problem with 3 as well. I didn't talk about, but this has human villains, and that's pretty good. It's more important that human negligence and evil to fit with the book is the consequence and problem. And super smart, invincible, invisible, mind-controlling dinosaur. It's kind of stupid. So, but the movie, even though it had a bigger budget, it felt way less grand in scope for some reason. But whatever. So in general, I would say I like this series a lot. Let's do wrap-up time, guys. Dinosaurs are cool. And for a horror film, the idea of being eaten alive by this monstrously huge alien beast crushing and tearing you apart and eating you, that's fucking awesome. My personal ranking in these movies in terms of my personal preference from worst to best, Jurassic World, actually Jurassic Park III, Fallen Kingdom, the original, and Lost World. The original book is way better than the second book. And hopefully Dominion will be interesting, and it'll be less of a packaged product than Jurassic World. Anyway, thanks guys for sticking along for our, 51 minutes or whatever. Have a great day.
My name is John Hammond, and I am in charge of InGen, the company that you now